All right, joining us now on Skype from Abuja is anti-corruption activist, initiator, Follow the Money, and founder, Connected Development, Hamzat Lawal. Hamzat, good morning. It's good to have you join us right now. Well, the point there is Nigerians are quite happy to see the development of government at least giving figures to how much has been spent. But how satisfied are you when it comes to the response from government so far regarding your request?
Good morning, and thank you for having me. It is some level of progress that the government have now responded to our FOI, the FOI that we jointly wrote with SERAP. It's quite exciting and it's commendable, but it's not satisfying because you cannot just give us a summary of how much government have utilized without providing details of what this money was spent on. The Nigerian people must know, taxpayers must know, and this would also help to build public trust. And we have a government who says they're fighting corruption. So you cannot provide lip service to fighting corruption. Give us specific details to every single kobo on how you utilize COVID-19 resources during this pandemic.
So at the very early stage of the outbreak in Nigeria, you said that one of the challenges is that we do not have an aggregated platform where we can see where the monies are coming from and what they are being used for. When you look at between that time and now, how have we fared in that regard?
When you look at between when we had the pandemic and when we had the outbreak and now, we've not really fared well. It's only COVID that have been able to tell us how much they have mobilized and how they're utilizing this money. But this is the first time that the federal government is coming public to tell, SERAP and Connected Development what they've utilized the money for. Then we were saying, can we have the Accountant General of the Federation and the Minister of Finance to collate this data and publish it in the public domain? Let's have income, expenditure, and value for these expenses, so that this would also help promote transparency and accountability. And we know that public procurement is where you have corruption in every society. And during this pandemic, the federal government have procured a lot of materials, both healthcare-wise and PPEs. So we're saying that publish this information and let's know who benefited from these procurement practices, and then Nigerian can have public trust and understand rather the value for these resources.
All right, Hamzat, you've given about 7 days window for the government to respond to your request of getting the details of how and the breakdown of all of that. What next after that? And if they don't abide by the 7 days, what happens?
Well, the law that established the Freedom of Information Act says that within 7 days, government must respond. And in any case that government is unable to respond within 7 days, they're bound by law to write us officially and say they needed more time. But then on this case, government does not even need time because they have all the records. And if, in any case, after 7 days they don't respond, we know that SERAP, it's a litigation advocacy organization. We would approach the courts. We would approach the bench and get an injunction that compels government to respond, because this is public money that is kept based on public trust, and government must provide public information.
You seem to be only interested in the funds, but we know that people also donated PPEs. For example, we had the donation from Jack Ma in terms of not cash. He donated PPEs, and other people did the same thing. So we had people donate ambulance and all of that. Are you not interested in how those items were also used?
We're very much interested in every item that was donated towards the fight against COVID-19. And that's why we also engaged NNPC, who has spent about 30 billion around COVID-19. And we wrote NDDC, and they confirmed how, if you look at their Twitter feed, they've confirmed how they received the equipment from Jack Ma and how this has been distributed across various public health facilities in the country. So we're interested in every donation, both in kind and in cash, on the utilization of COVID-19, the fight against COVID-19. And CACOVID have told us that they were going to account for every single penny that have been donated, and so far they've gotten about 37 billion, and they have a target of about 55 to 60 billion. But we must start with our federal government. Why? Because we cannot have a federal government that adjudicates their responsibility to private individual or private organization. They must also lead by showing example, because leadership is by example.
Now, let's look at the figures. You have federal government spending 22 billion naira and state 7 billion naira. The police spent 500 million naira on PPEs, while the Nigerian Air Force spent 877 million naira. Now, when you look at these figures, are they commensurate with the social development plan steps taken so far and the impact on citizens?
Well, thank you again for having me. No, when you look at this spending, we cannot measure the impact on citizens. Again, when you look at data released by the National Bureau of Statistics, over 55% of young people, young Nigerians lost their job during this pandemic. So when you look at these expenditures and the impact on people, and when I say people, ordinary Nigerians, particularly at the grassroots, they are not commensurable. So when government is saying they've spent over 30 billion, what have you spent this money on? And this money, you say you've given the police, you've given Air Force and a few other government MDs. What exactly have they used that money for? Mind you, there's also the question mark around palliative. How much was actually spent on palliative? Because the Accountant General's figures did not talk about palliative. So how much was spent on palliative? Who are the beneficiaries of this palliative across Nigeria?
All right, Hamzat, I want to create a scenario here where if the government returns to you with the details of the breakdown of all of the money spent and you jiggle them up and somehow the monies don't meet the claims, what will happen at that point? Will there be an EFCC involvement or ICPC, or what will happen?
Well, if the government responds to our FOI request and the numbers are not tallying, yes, we would write a petition not only to the EFCC or the ICPC, we would also write a petition to the National Assembly to call for a public hearing. Because again, when we undertake social audits, we must ensure that all the I's are crossed and the T's, all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. So yes, we hope that the National Assembly will take this up and have a public hearing and invite various government MDAs or heads of ministries to come and give a breakdown on how these monies are expended.
So there are people who think that you might be speaking too soon, that we're still dealing with the pandemic and monies are still being spent, that perhaps all of these audits should come post-pandemic.
Oh, no. So if you even look at the releases, and I must stress this, over 100 Nigerians donated between 1 naira and 100 naira. This shows you that Nigerians want to support government efforts towards fighting COVID-19. Mind you, we're also dealing with another pandemic called fake news. So when government have refused to provide timely information, when they've refused to provide public information around figures that were spent or resources that were spent towards fighting COVID-19, you're empowering mischief makers to go public, to cause more misinformation and cause more crisis. And if you look at the country right now, there's lack of trust between government and the citizens. And for you to rebuild back public trust, you must provide details of how you're utilizing public resources during a time of crisis. So we cannot wait post-COVID-19. And then people would now say, oh, well, we've tackled COVID-19, let's move on. No, you have to provide accountability right now, because this is a government that talks about transparency. This is a government that talks about fighting corruption. So when you don't provide public information, it's tantamount to corruption. So for us, accountability must be embedded in the utilization of these resources now more than ever before.
All right, now, holding government or requesting for these information could be seen as a window of opportunity to hold government to account. Now, in a situation where Nigerians have to own this and have to buy into what you're doing, how are you engaging with Nigerians on a daily basis on the enlightenment and an awareness campaign for them to support what you're doing in holding government to account?
Follow the Money Social Accountability Drive. Right now, we have over 7,000 members across all the 704 local governments. And we're using our champions, we call them Follow the Money champions, to reach out to various communities to sensitize the public. Beyond just holding government to account, is also to ensure that they put in place measures to curb the spread of COVID-19. And now that we're experiencing a community spread, so we are supporting NCDC awareness drive and federal government awareness drive, working with various partners and mobilizing citizens, raising their consciousness and awareness, and particularly around public expenditure and value for these resources.
Initiator Follow the Money and founder Connected Development, Hamzat Lawal, thanks for talking to us.
Thank you for having me.